50th anniversary of the Fundraising School and what that means for fundraising today. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the Fundraising School, and I'm honored to welcome back our longtime director, Dr. Tim Siler, who led the Fundraising School for 20 years, has remained active with our school in this last decade, and is here to share his memories of the Fundraising School, talk about how fundraising has evolved over these 50 years, and what that means for fundraising today. And Tim is my longtime mentor. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome him back. Tim, thank you for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
You're welcome, Bill. Thanks for the invitation. I'm always pleased to have a chance to talk with you. And anything I can do to help the Fundraising School, I'm always eager to do that.
Well, and you do that every day for us. As we teach our classes, we invite our alumni to contact us with ongoing questions, and we send those along to Tim, and he stays engaged with our course participants in that way. Tim, June 24th, 1974, the first course of the Fundraising School was taught by our founder, Dr. Henry Rosso, in curriculum typed up by his wife, Dottie Rosso. What are your recollections in your conversations with Hank from those earliest days of the school?
Well, there are several things I remember quite vividly about Hank. And one that has stuck with me over the years, and I've often quoted Hank in teaching courses myself, and that is at the end of the course, he asked everybody for one thing they most remembered from the course. This was in the days when the course was almost 5 full days. We started on Sunday evening, we ended at noon on Friday. And so I'm scrambling around trying to think, what am I going to say that I can remember from this course? And the one thing that popped into my mind was fundraising succeeds when you plan, 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 and ask. And so that's what I quoted. And Hank kind of chuckled a little bit. I still quote that. And by the way, I would say that's one of the constants. I believe that's the same today as it was then. That successful fundraising depends a great deal upon planning, but you can't forget the asking part. And Bill, you may have been the one that added this other thought, but I quoted that once in a course, and somebody said, maybe it was you, Bill, said, well, I would add to that, plan, 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 ask, steward.
Yeah.
And that's a really important piece. And I think there might be some differences today in regard to how our organizations steward gifts and how they practice stewardship and how they hold themselves accountable. I believe that the profession has gone a long way towards improving in that regard. I think for a long time we focused too much on asking, and our donors would often remind us that we don't do anything but ask. And I think that we've gotten better at thanking and at stewarding and holding ourselves accountable and at measuring outcomes and impact. And I think if I can just kind of ramble on here.
Please.
There's a lot that's the same today, I believe, as there was 50 years ago, and even before Hank started the Fundraising School. I mean, fundraising has been going on a long time, right?
Yes.
And whether it was professional could be questioned, but that's what Hank wanted to do, is bring professionalism to fundraising. I think he did that through the Fundraising School, and I think you've continued that quite remarkably in your leadership in the school. But I think there's a generational difference today from the donor perspective. And by that, I mean that my age group, I think I'm a baby boomer, and I think we were some of the first ones who began to question institutions and to lose faith in institutions. And some of the things I've been reading recently about millennials and Gen Zs, they have less trust in institutions even than we did as the baby boomers, which makes a challenge for fundraising to prove our value, to prove our worth from an institutional or an organizational perspective. So I think that's a difference today from what it was when we got started. Fundraising school got started 50 some years ago, or 50 years ago. And I think that I think in a lot of ways that's a positive, that it tests us every day as an institution or as an organization to prove our worth. And we prove our worth by fulfilling our organizational mission. And today's younger people, much more focused on mission, I believe, than the older generations were. Because we trusted institutions, we had faith in institutions, we tended to give to support those institutions because they had been good for us and they had been good to us in some ways. But I think that's all being challenged much more today. Now, from a fundraising perspective, I'd say that I think there's more the same. Things are more the same than they are different. But I think the differences are more in technique. Much more reliance on social media today, for example. Probably less reliance upon direct mail. Probably less reliance upon the big special event, which so many organizations hold as galas. Now, an exception to that statement, those organizations which have what I refer to as signature events, I think they can still be successful. They are still successful in fundraising through a large gala. But I think probably more organizations today need to rely upon smaller get-togethers where the community is brought together in a more meaningful way, because I think that's what donors are looking for. And I would relate that to social media, because in some ways, social media isolates us. We use the phone, we use texts, we use instant messaging, we use techniques that I don't even know about. But my daughter-in-law and my son are quite effective at using these different techniques. But there's also a sense of isolation with that. You're not with people in the same way you are when you're in the same room with them. So I think that the smaller events or the smaller social special event kinds of things, I think can actually bring people together into a community that gives them more satisfaction and more fulfillment than they get through just social media.
More intimate, more personal, bringing people together.
Correct. I want to add a couple of things I heard from colleagues over the years about successful fundraising. And I know when I started, one of the first things I took away from the course from Hank, I mean, he emphasized this so much, was you're not going to raise a lot of money through direct mail. You're not going to raise a lot of money through special events. You're going to raise more money, and you're going to raise what have come to be known as major gifts. And now I think there's even an emphasis on what are called principal gifts. And then there's the institutional changing kind of event. Gift. And what colleagues of mine have said over the years is that kind of real money is raised kneecap to kneecap. I mean, you're face to face. You're asking someone. You're making an invitation in a very personal, warm kind of way. And then another colleague of mine had a different take on that, which he actually learned from a donor who said, you know, we should not think about this relationship as being face to face or kneecap to kneecap. We should think about this relationship as being shoulder to shoulder as we look out at the horizon and see what difference we can make together. And I think there's a level of sophistication there that donors have brought to us as fundraisers, which is that we want to share a vision of how working together we can not only fulfill the organizational mission, but we can fulfill a personal philanthropic vision. And that's what I liked about that image of shoulder to shoulder, looking out at what can be done.
Tim, I love that. And if I could amplify and then also bring us to a topic that I know you're passionate about, that shoulder to shoulder, and it's side by side. And we're looking out at that horizon together at what is possible. shows how fundraising is transformational, not transactional. We have transactional in the business sector, makes total sense. You buy something, you pay for it, that's the relationship. In fundraising, the transformational, and we teach this in our leadership courses, is the donor's alignment with the nonprofit's mission is we all agree on the vision, we all agree on the cause, and what can we do to play our part and then collaborate together, including through financial giving, to achieve that cause. That's a transformational relationship. And as we enter those relationships, we need to do so with great care. And I know one of your passions, and you taught me this, and this is what I repeat, and I quote you many times, this is one of those quotes, is that the fundraising school doesn't teach fundraising. We teach ethical fundraising. And I know the ethical part of this is so important to you, to the standpoint that for a while you were teaching a course, or at least some modules, as I recall, on using the correct words and using the correct terms because of what that meant in an honoring transformational relationship with the donor. Could you please describe this passion that you have on the importance of ethical fundraising?
Right. Again, going back to Hank, at the very beginning, that was the phrase that he used in all of his work, and it was in all of the study guides. The fundraising school dedicated to the advancement of ethical fundraising. And part of the ethical fundraising, which I came to be, as you say, very passionate about, was how we talk about what we do. Because when I first got started, there was quite a bit of embarrassment about fundraising. There were negative terms associated with fundraising. People didn't want to be fundraisers. We were often looked down upon, and people would joke that if they saw me coming, they walked across the street to get away from me because they didn't want my hands in their pockets. I mean, you hear that kind of stuff, and I'm pleased to say I'm hearing less of it today than I did when we got started. And I'm not even going to repeat some of the negative phrases because I don't want to bring them back up. But the way Hank talked about it, the way the fundraising school continues to talk about fundraising, is you're inviting people to participate in the fulfillment of a mission. And that mission is both organizational and personal. And it's about being philanthropic. And again, one of Hank's favorite statements was, fundraising is the gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving. And now, we're still going to hear some pushback from donors sometimes. Well, I'd be happy to have a little less joy so that I'd have to do a little less giving. But I think ultimately we all get a great deal of fulfillment out of being philanthropic in our own way. And, I want to add here the thought that from the perspective of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, philanthropy is more than giving of money. It's the giving of time. It's the giving of talent. And I heard a former professor of mine give a speech at a dinner one evening honoring donors, in which he said, we've added another T word to time, talent, treasure, and that is toil. Because a group of people had gotten together to renovate a facility on a campus, and they put in the time themselves to do all the work to get the work done. So time, treasure, talent, toil. I liked that. So I've had a lot of really influential people teach me some interesting things over my career.
Well, Tim, you've seen fundraising evolve over time, and yet there are some things that are just still in place that are foundational from one year to the next. One of those, for example, is another T word is ties, relationship. And also for a play on words, is I know you are an English major who loves a play on words. We always used to wear a necktie when we taught. And boy, did I think about you the first day after COVID when I decided to ditch the necktie. And because, things have just changed. We used to teach with mimeograph sheets, and now we have online study guides and people all over the world who can take our classes online. With all of that in mind, Tim, what still are some of those kind of just steady things that are still there for fundraising, even though we have now all of these digital opportunities and different ways that we can communicate with donors in all of the ways that they want to be philanthropic?
Well, in addition to the plan, ask, and steward, I think the 4 I's that I first learned when I got into fundraising 50 some years ago, and that is we still have to do this work, which is we have to inform, we have to invite, we have to involve. And if we do those three things properly, the donors will invest. So inform, invite, involve, invest, and add the steward. So I think that is a universal. One of the first things I learned in fundraising was the instructor said, successful fundraising is all about relationships. And I think that is another universal. It's timeless, that we have to spend the time to develop the relationships, to earn the trust, to give us the right to invite people to make meaningful gifts, meaningful to them and meaningful and helpful to our organizations.
I'm going to think of a fifth I word to capture stewardship. Right now I'm at iterate, but I think it's a first draft that needs some work.
Okay.
You know, you mentioned Hank's definition of fundraising, the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. He came up with that in the early 1970s. As you well know, we now have the science to back that up. In fact, a couple of our professors on our faculty are leaders in that social psychology that shows what is happening in our brains and synapse connections and, different body chemistries. And it's the same as when we experience euphoria. These are the same types of things they see when folks, are active philanthropically. Tim, can you please talk about that, this isn't just something that's made up. It's not just something that happens. That the plan, ask, and then steward. There are evidence-based practices, and fundraisers can gain confidence because of the science behind the profession.
Right. Well, there's another positive from the perspective of what Hank started as a training program, which he had a desire would become part of a university, and we know people who brought that all together to form the Center on Philanthropy. And the Center on Philanthropy was kind of a dream realization for Hank, that his training was now housed inside a university where there was credibility that would bring additional research and background to practice. And as the center became the school, and as you mentioned, faculty now engaged in these kinds of research projects are demonstrating. It's what we've always said from the very beginning of the Center on Philanthropy. We believe that research informs practice and practice informs research. And I think we've formed a really good partnership in that regard.
And we see from our alumni, that is why nearly 80% of them who implement what we teach tell us that they raise more money as a result. And 95% of them say they gain confidence to fundraising because of this strong foundation that you see that Dr. Siler is explaining for us here today. This is now expressed through 24 public courses. We still have that initial course from 1974, Principles and Techniques of Fundraising. Of course, it's been updated with the newest research, the newest trends, the newest techniques. An entire module now just on stewardship, to Tim's earlier point. And that is the cornerstone course that leads to our certificate in fundraising management, one of 4 certificates that we offer at the fundraising school. Now, we can customize training specifically for your nonprofit, your association, your region. It could be one of those public courses. It could be parts of courses that we knit together just for you. Our coursework is available in person and online in the United States, anywhere across the world. We have these weekly podcasts, quarterly webinars, and of course, the seminal textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, first written by Dr. Henry Rosso and now in its 5th edition. All of this information is available on our website, which is go.iu.edu/TFRS for the fundraising school. go.iu.edu/TFRS. Captain, my captain, Dr. Tim Siler, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Bill. I enjoyed the opportunity.
And this podcast produced today by Jennifer Bachman and Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. Now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the fundraising school.